I'm Jason UFC, and today we have a story about Dana White and Paddy Pimblett trash. MMA reporter, I wouldn't call him a UFC reporter, but MMA reporter Ariel Helwani online. Paddy Pimblett and Dana White sounded off on MMA journalist Ariel Helwani for how he uses fighters to create content. Uh-oh. What's happening here? What just happened? White joined Paddy Pimblett on his podcast where the two trash the MMA host Ariel Helwani, the UFC president. This light for Ariel Helwani has long been documented. However, it was quite surprising to hear the baddie's comment regarding fighters being paid for an interview. Paddy Pimblett said, Ariel Helwani uses fighters to make money and tries to have the audacity to talk about the UFC and yourself being Dana White, saying they don't pay the fighters enough. Get your dough out, Ariel. You know what I mean? Start paying people for these interviews. You make thousands of dollars. You're doing it for exposure. No, you're not. You are doing to put money in your pocket, Ariel, you little rodent. Wow. The UFC president Dana White chimed in and didn't mince any words with his personal views on Helwani, saying Ariel Helwani is a massive sack of S. He's the biggest F piece of S. This isn't funny, right? What am I doing? I can't even say any of these words, right? Biggest piece of S of all time. I couldn't have said it better. This dude ego is so F massive. He's one of the slimiest, scummiest mother effers you will ever come across. Wow. Is it really that serious? Wow. Paddy Pimblett noted that he was upset because he felt that he was being used to drive website traffic and views that generate ad revenue for the journalists. Okay. Okay, do we have to even get into, okay, I guess we have to get into when did their beef start? Paddy Pimblett and Ariel Helwani fallout took place in 2021. The UFC lightweight managers insinuated that the MMA journalist Ariel Helwani could find the budget that his outlet would be willing to pay for the interview with Paddy Pimblett. The disagreement that followed eventually led to Paddy Pimblett, the baddie's manager, posting a message on Instagram that fighters should be aware of their worth, especially in a world where digital content brings profit. Since the Baddies podcast with White, many fans and journalists have weighed in, included. Okay, I'm not gonna even get into what Luke Thomas had to say. I just don't have anything to say about that. This is an interesting thing here, right? Now, I guess there are some people who pay for interviews, so I can understand that. I can respect that, and I don't disagree with that. But I'm not too crazy about the idea of a journalist paying for interviews, right? Am I wrong about that? That seems like kind of, that's not really how journalism works, right? And I guess in this interview that Paddy Pimblett gave with Dana White, or this podcast that they were doing, Paddy Pimblett made the point that Helwani doesn't pay for his interviews, or Paddy Pimblett offered to be on the show, but Helwani didn't want to pay for his interview, and Paddy Pimblett believes that Ariel Helwani is not a journalist, that he's just a content creator. That's interesting. I personally, here's where I'm going to stand on this. I think that's just Paddy Pimblett opinion, right? If he feels like the bag social media bag and YouTube bag, because he did mention that he has a YouTube page. I would say with that, since he does have a YouTube page, he should slow down, because if you start talking like that, then anyone that's on your page or any content you create, right? People are gonna say, "Hey, why didn't you pay me for that?" I'm in your video. You're using this. You're using that. I didn't get any money from that, right? So if Paddy Pimblett is going to pay everybody that he features in his videos, that's cool. But I don't think a journalist, I'm not too crazy about the idea of journalists paying for their interviews with UFC fighters or anything like that. I'm not against the idea of, hey, if you are going to be a content creator and you interview a fighter and you say, like, listen, if this does 1 million views, obviously we could split what the revenue from that. But I mean, like, how far are we going to go? Are we going to say that people like myself don't even have a right to cover anything in the UFC unless I'm paying money for it, or I'm this culture vulture because I love the sport of MMA and I don't really have access to it, but I read about it and I make content about it. It's like, if we were to go down that route, it would be very tough for almost all content creators, right? Because in many ways, even as a content creator, you're not really, not everybody is necessarily creating everything, right? Like, if you cover a certain sport and you're a content creator, you're not a journalist and you don't really have access to those athletes. I think it should be fair for you to cover the sport and not be considered like a culture vulture or someone that should pay for the interviews or someone who shouldn't even have an opinion, right? So, but let me know your opinion of this story. Obviously, Dana White already has his beef with Ariel Helwani. But let me know. Personally, I say this about this story. If Paddy Pimblett doesn't want to do an interview with Ariel Helwani or anyone who doesn't pay him, I respect that. I have no problem with that. I have no problem with any MMA fighter or any UFC fighter or any MMA fighter saying, like, listen, I don't want to be on Ariel Helwani's show because he doesn't offer payment to us. I personally don't think that's a great idea. Ariel Helwani is an MMA journalist, right? I don't think he should pay for interviews. So, but I agree with both sides in this argument. I know it sounds kind of crazy. I'm just saying that Paddy Pimblett, if he doesn't want to do interviews with Ariel Helwani because Ariel Helwani doesn't pay him, or Ariel Helwani has this big enough media platform that he could perform, that he could, he has the ability to pay for some of these viral interviews he does with fighters, then that's Paddy Pimblett's opinion, and I wouldn't change that. But my opinion is, I'm not crazy about the idea of journalists paying for interviews. And I'm also, obviously, as I cover this UFC sport from the outside, I'm not crazy about the idea of people saying, well, if you don't have access to the fighters, you're a culture vulture, and as a content creator, you shouldn't even have an opinion on the sport, right? But let me know your opinion of this story. I am Jason UFC. Today we had a story about UFC President Dana White and Paddy, UFC lightweight fighter, who will be scheduled for a fight at UFC 282 this weekend. While doing a podcast together, they trash MMA reporter Ariel Helwani. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the $1 donation button, and please tune in to the next video on this channel. Thanks a million for watching.